Our story starts in Alexandria, Kentucky, a small, peaceful town where everyone knows everyone. The kind of place where people still wave to their neighbors and leave their doors unlocked. Robert Bosley, everyone called him Bob, was born here on August 2nd, 1962. He grew up in a religious family with his brothers and sister. From a young age, Bob was different. He had ambition, he had drive, and most importantly, he had a dream. Bob didn't want an ordinary life. He wanted to be wealthy. He wanted to be his own boss, and he was willing to work for it. So Bob started from the bottom, and I mean the very bottom. He began offering chimney cleaning services and small roof repairs. Just him, some basic tools, and a lot of determination. He worked long hours, he charged fair prices, and he treated every customer with respect. Slowly but surely, word spread. People started calling Bob when they needed work done. They trusted him, they liked him, and his little one-man operation began to grow. Before long, Bob had transformed his small service into something much bigger. He called it Bosley Roofing and Chimney Sweep of Alexandria. The company became known throughout the region for quality work, reliability, and fair dealing. Money started flowing in. Good money. But Bob wasn't satisfied yet. He had bigger plans. With his roofing business thriving, Bob started buying rental properties. One by one, he acquired homes and buildings. Eventually, he owned around 20 properties. These investments brought in even more income. Bob was becoming one of the most successful businessmen in Campbell County. And when the money came in, Bob enjoyed it. He bought luxury sports cars, he purchased horses, he even bought an airplane and a large boat. Bob loved the finer things in life, and now he could afford them all. His boat became particularly famous in the area. Bob would take it out on Lake Cumberland for parties, wild parties, the kind filled with loud music, flowing drinks, and people having a good time. Bob's lake parties became legendary. Some people loved him for it, others whispered behind his back. But Bob didn't care. He was living his dream. Now, let's talk about Amy. Amy Pave was born in 1969, also in Alexandria. But her childhood was very different from Bob's success story. Amy grew up in a working-class family that struggled with money. Her father battled with drinking problems, which made life at home difficult. But Amy was smart. She was determined. She didn't want to stay stuck in the same cycle. After graduating high school with excellent grades in 1986, Amy enrolled in a business program at a community college connected to Northern Kentucky University. To pay for her education, Amy worked as a waitress at a local restaurant. The work was hard, the hours were long, and the tips weren't always great. But Amy kept pushing forward, and that's where she met him, Bob Bosley. Bob was a regular customer at the restaurant. He was older than Amy, confident, successful, charming, everything Amy wasn't used to. At first, Amy was reserved. She served his table, smiled politely, and went about her work. But Bob noticed her, and he was interested. He started talking to her, asking about her life, her dreams, her goals. Before long, Bob invited Amy to one of his famous lake parties. Amy hesitated at first. This wasn't her world. But eventually, she said yes. That first party changed everything. Amy found herself drawn into Bob's exciting lifestyle. The boats, the cars, the freedom. It was intoxicating. She started going to more parties. She became part of Bob's inner circle. And somewhere along the way, something unexpected happened. Bob fell for her. Their relationship grew serious. Amy, the struggling waitress from a difficult background, was now dating one of the most eligible bachelors in the region. After 4 years together, Bob asked Amy to marry him. She said yes. For Amy, this was the ultimate transformation. She went from financial struggle to marrying wealth and success. It was like a fairy tale come true. In 1996, Amy and Bob welcomed their daughter, Morgan. 3 years later, their son Trevor was born. Amy's life changed completely. The wild party girl lifestyle faded away. She became focused on being a mother, school events, parent-teacher meetings, birthday parties. Amy threw herself into family life. Bob, meanwhile, continued expanding his business empire. His roofing company was busier than ever. The rental properties kept generating income. Everything looked perfect from the outside. But here's where things started to change. Bob hated paperwork. He hated dealing with invoices, payroll, taxes, and all the administrative headaches that came with running a business. He was a hands-on guy. He wanted to be out working, not stuck behind a desk pushing papers. So Bob started disappearing more often. Weekends would come, and he'd take off on his boat, sometimes for entire days. He wouldn't tell Amy where he was going or when he'd be back. Friends later said Bob seemed to be drifting away from family life, pulled back toward his old lifestyle of freedom and indulgence. Some sources even claim that Bob and Amy had what some people call an open relationship. Whether that's true or not, we can't say for certain, but what we do know is that tension was building. Eventually, Bob came up with a solution to his paperwork problem. Amy had studied business administration in college, right? She understood finances. She was organized. So Bob asked Amy to take over managing the company's books. Amy seemed hesitant at first, but eventually she agreed. From that point on, Amy handled everything financial: payroll for the workers, invoices for customers, and most importantly, the company's tax obligations. The business kept booming. The Bosley family seemed to be thriving. They were living in a rustic log cabin in the woods while their dream home was being built nearby. And what a dream home it was. 14 acres of land, stained glass windows, a stone tower, even Gothic gargoyles decorating the exterior. To everyone in Alexandria, the Bosleys represented the American dream. They were attractive, successful, generous. They were active in their church. They volunteered at their children's school. Bob often donated his services to help low-income families who couldn't afford roof repairs. People respected them, admired them, wanted to be like them. But you know what they say. Not everything that glitters is gold. Behind the scenes, something was very wrong. And it had been wrong for a long time. When Amy took over the company's finances, she gained access to everything. She saw exactly how much money was coming in. She controlled where it went. And most importantly, she was responsible for paying the company's taxes to the IRS. Now, the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, they don't play games. Every business has to pay taxes. It's the law, and the penalties for not paying are severe. But here's what Amy did. Instead of paying the company's taxes like she was supposed to, Amy started diverting that money. She set up a private bank account that Bob didn't know about. And month after month, year after year, she funneled tax money into that secret account. We're not talking about small amounts here. Amy embezzled nearly $2 million. Think about that. $2 million stolen from her own husband's company. Now you might be wondering, how did she get away with this for so long? How did Bob not notice? Well, Amy was clever. She knew the IRS would start sending letters, making phone calls, demanding meetings. So Amy set up a private mailbox that only she could access. She arranged for all IRS correspondence to go there instead of to Bob's office or their home. Every warning letter, every notice, every demand for payment. Amy intercepted all of it. Bob never saw any of these warnings. He had no idea that his company owed the government nearly $2 million. No idea that the IRS was circling closer and closer. Amy must have thought she could keep this going forever. Maybe she believed she'd find a way to fix it eventually. Or maybe she just didn't want to face the consequences. But there's an old saying, you can't avoid death and taxes. And the IRS was running out of patience. While this financial disaster was building in secret, there were other problems too. Bob's frequent disappearances on his boat weren't just about escaping paperwork. According to people who knew them, Bob had started having affairs. Multiple affairs. His sister later told investigators that she once heard Amy say something chilling. Amy said if Bob ever cheated on her or tried to leave her, she would shoot him. At the time, everyone laughed it off. Just Amy being dramatic, right? Just a figure of speech. But looking back, those words would take on a much darker meaning. The IRS kept trying to reach Bob. They called, they wrote, they scheduled meetings. But Amy kept intercepting everything. During one phone call, an IRS agent spoke to someone claiming to be Bob Bosley. But something was off. The voice sounded strange, high-pitched, unnatural. It sounded like a woman trying to pretend to be a man. That voice belonged to Amy. But despite her best efforts, time was running out. The IRS scheduled a mandatory face-to-face meeting with Bob Bosley for Tuesday, May 17, 2005. This meeting was non-negotiable. This time, Amy couldn't intercept it. Bob would show up to that meeting. The IRS agents would ask about the missing tax payments, and the truth would come crashing down. Amy's secret would be exposed. Her husband would learn she'd stolen nearly $2 million from him. What would happen then? Divorce, certainly. Criminal charges, probably. Prison time, most likely. Amy would lose everything. Her home, her lifestyle, her children, her freedom. Everything she had worked so hard to build would be destroyed. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday morning, May 17th. But Bob Bosley would never make it to that meeting because something terrible happened the night before. May 17th, 2005, around 5 in the morning. Still dark outside. The 911 dispatch center received a frantic call. It was a woman's voice, screaming, panicked. She said someone had broken into her house. Someone had attacked her and her husband. The call was suddenly interrupted by a loud crashing sound. Then, the line went dead. Dispatchers tried calling back. No answer. They immediately sent police racing toward the Bosley cabin. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Amy Bosley outside, clutching her 2 children. She appeared to be in shock. Her blouse was torn. She had the marks on her chest. Amy's sister soon arrived to take Morgan and Trevor away from the scene. Meanwhile, police secured the property and called in the crime scene investigation unit. As the sun came up, more officers arrived. K-9 units, search teams, even a helicopter. They searched the surrounding forest, looking for what they believed was a dangerous intruder who had fled into the woods. Inside the bedroom, investigators made a grim discovery: Bob Bosley's body. He was found kneeling beside the bed, slumped forward. He had been shot multiple times. The scene was brutal. But something felt off right from the start. Officers found only 2 shell casings in the bedroom, just 2. But Bob had multiple gunshot wounds. Where were the other casings? The entire house was in complete disarray. Kitchen cabinets stood wide open, even the cabinets under the sink, which seemed like a strange place for a burglar to search. Drawers were pulled out with contents scattered everywhere. The back door had a broken window, presumably where the intruder broke in. But here's something interesting. Most of the shattered glass was found outside the house, not inside. That's not how it works when someone breaks in from outside. The glass should fall inward. This small detail caught the investigators' attention immediately. In the bathroom, the medicine cabinet mirror was open. Prescription bottles were scattered across the floor. The whole scene looked messy, chaotic. But to trained eyes, it looked staged, like someone was trying too hard to make it look like a robbery. Meanwhile, down at the police station, detectives began questioning Amy. She seemed shaken up, distraught, but also confused, like she was struggling to keep her story straight. Amy described the intruder as a white male. She said he had a nasal voice, bad breath, and smelled like urine. According to Amy, this man had burst into their home during the night and attacked both her and Bob. She showed the officers 2 marks on her chest, claiming the intruder had hurt her during the struggle. When detectives asked who might want to harm Bob, Amy suggested that maybe he wasn't well liked. She said Bob had a wild reputation. Maybe he had enemies. Maybe one of his employees was angry with him. She specifically mentioned a contractor named Noah Heim, who had recently argued with Bob about something work-related. But investigators quickly ruled Noah out. He had a solid alibi. Plus, Noah was genuinely devastated by Bob's death. He'd been Bob's friend for years. While Amy was being questioned, panic spread through Alexandria. Schools closed for several days. Parents kept their children home. Everyone was afraid that a dangerous killer was loose in their quiet town. Neighbors couldn't believe it. Bob Bosley, murdered? The same Bob who would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it? Who helped people fix their roofs for free when they couldn't afford to pay? Who was always smiling and friendly? It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Back at the cabin, the crime scene investigators kept searching, and that's when they found something crucial, something that would crack this case wide open. The investigators expanded their search to the basement, and there, inside the family's washing machine, they made a discovery that changed everything: soaked clothing. And at the bottom of the machine, wrapped in a folded cloth, 4 additional shell casings. 4 casings, added to the 2 found in the bedroom. That made 6 total, 6 shots fired. But here's the question that stopped everyone cold. Why would a fleeing intruder take the time to hide evidence inside the victim's washing machine? It makes no sense. An intruder would be panicked, desperate to get away. They wouldn't stick around to hide shell casings in the laundry, unless the person who hid those casings lived in the house. Nearby, investigators found something else: an aluminum baseball bat with fresh scratches and white residue on it. They bagged it for lab analysis. Despite these findings, Amy was released and allowed to go home with her children. But the investigators were already starting to see the bigger picture. The crime scene looked staged. Valuable items, including stacks of cash, were left completely untouched. What kind of robber breaks in and doesn't take anything valuable? And Amy's emotional display seemed off. Officers noted that despite her apparent distress, she never actually cried. No real tears, no genuine grief. It felt performed, rehearsed. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. Staff members from the IRS visited the police station. They'd heard about Bob Bosley's death on the news. They needed to tell investigators something important. The IRS had been trying to contact Bob for months about a massive unpaid tax bill. Over $1.7 million. They'd sent letters, made phone calls, and finally they'd scheduled a mandatory meeting with Bob for Tuesday morning, the very morning his body was found. The IRS agents also shared something bizarre. During one phone conversation, they'd spoken to someone claiming to be Bob Bosley, but the voice sounded strange, high-pitched, obviously fake. To them, it sounded exactly like a woman trying to impersonate a man. Suddenly, investigators had a clear motive. Amy Bosley, trusted with managing the company's finances, had been stealing money for years, diverting tax payments into her own private account. Bob had no idea any of this was happening. He was about to walk into that IRS meeting where the truth would explode in his face, but there was more. Bob's sister came forward with another disturbing piece of information. She told investigators that she'd once overheard Amy say something. Amy said if Bob ever cheated on her or left her, she would shoot him. At the time, everyone thought it was just talk, just Amy being dramatic. But now it sounded like a promise, a threat, a plan. The pieces were falling into place, but investigators needed more evidence. They needed to be absolutely certain before they charged Amy with murder. Despite the mounting evidence against her, Amy Bosley continued to deny everything. During her second interrogation, she insisted she loved Bob. Sure, their marriage wasn't perfect. What marriage is? They had their problems like any couple, but she would never harm the father of her children. Never. But investigators weren't buying it anymore. The evidence kept piling up. Ballistics testing came back. All 6 bullets that struck Bob matched the 6 shell casings collected from the scene. 2 from the bedroom floor, 4 from the washing machine. Then came a crucial moment. Detectives interviewed Morgan and Trevor Bosley. The children were only 9 and 6 years old. They were questioned separately in the presence of child psychologists and family advocates. Both children told the same story. They had been sleeping peacefully in their beds. Then they heard gunshots. 6 shots. loud bangs that woke them up. After the gunshots, they heard glass breaking. This was huge. Amy's version of events had the order reversed. She claimed the intruder broke the glass first, then fired the shots. But her own children contradicted her story. The gunshots came first, then the glass. Her timeline was falling apart. Investigators took another look at the scratches on Amy's chest. The ones she claimed came from struggling with the intruder. The marks were too symmetrical, too evenly spaced. They looked staged, not like real defensive wounds from a violent struggle. And then there was her blouse, the torn blouse she'd been wearing when police arrived. Forensic examination revealed something damning. The blouse hadn't been torn during an attack. It had been carefully cut with scissors, then ripped to make it appear damaged. Everything was staged, all of it. Less than 2 weeks after Bob's murder, authorities arrested Amy Bosley. She was formally charged with murder. But investigators were still missing one crucial piece of evidence: the murder weapon. Where was the gun? This part of the story has two different versions depending on who you ask. According to one account, a pistol from Bob's own gun collection was found hidden in Amy's handbag, tucked behind a wardrobe in the home. The second version claims the weapon was discovered by Amy's sister. After that terrible night, Amy's sister had taken custody of both children and had been holding on to Amy's belongings. While going through Amy's purse, she allegedly found the gun. She immediately contacted a lawyer who turned the weapon over to police. Whichever version is true, the gun was found. And ballistic testing confirmed it matched the 6 shell casings found at the crime scene and in the washing machine. The bullets inside Bob's body were too damaged to confirm a perfect match. But the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The gun belonged to Bob's collection. The casings matched. The gun was found in Amy's possession. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors began putting together their narrative, and it painted a dark, disturbing picture. The prosecution laid out their case clearly and methodically. For years, Amy had been bleeding Bob's company dry. She'd diverted nearly $2 million in tax payments into her own secret account. She kept the IRS at bay through mail redirection and deception, but her time had run out. On the morning of May 17, 2005, Bob was scheduled to meet with IRS agents. They were demanding answers about the missing tax payments. Amy knew exactly what that meeting would mean: exposure. Her secret would be revealed. Bob would discover she'd been stealing from him for years. Divorce would be certain. Criminal charges would follow. She'd face prison time. Everything would be gone. So Amy made a desperate, terrible decision. The night before the IRS meeting, with her children sleeping in their rooms, Amy retrieved one of Bob's firearms. Some reports even suggest she may have sedated the children beforehand to make sure they wouldn't wake up. Standing beside the bed where her husband slept, Amy aimed the gun and fired. Bob, wounded but not killed instantly, woke up. According to investigators, the trajectory of his injuries indicated that he lunged toward his attacker. He tried to stop what was happening, only to realize in that horrible moment that his own wife was holding the gun, stunned, bleeding, betrayed. Bob couldn't overpower her. Amy fired again and again. By the time it was over, 6 bullets had struck Bob Bosley, the man who had built a fortune from nothing, who had trusted Amy with everything. He died in the home they were building for their future, killed by the woman who had stood beside him for 15 years. After committing the act, Amy went into cover-up mode. She shattered the rear glass door with an aluminum baseball bat, the same bat the children identified as belonging to their family. She tore through cabinets and drawers to make it look like a burglary. She wrapped 4 shell casings in cloth and hid them at the bottom of the washing machine. To create credible wounds, Amy lightly cut her own chest, likely with scissors. Then she slashed her blouse to simulate a violent struggle. Finally, she placed the frantic 911 call. Her voice panicked, the scene staged, but forensic evidence told the real story. Lab analysis confirmed that glass fragments on the aluminum bat matched the broken rear door. Police found no footprints outside, no vehicle tracks, no sign of anyone matching Amy's description. No intruder had come or gone that night. Meanwhile, investigators uncovered more about the Bosley marriage. Amy was convinced Bob had been unfaithful to her. Photos retrieved from the couple's safe, taken during wild parties on Lake Cumberland, revealed Bob's second life. The photos confirmed at least one extramarital affair. But while betrayal may have hurt Amy deeply, the real motive went far deeper. The IRS meeting was scheduled for the morning after Bob's death. One meeting that would have exposed everything Amy had done. By ending Bob's life, Amy believed she could bury her secret. With Bob gone, his assets would be used to cover the debt, and she could walk away with whatever remained. But the children's testimony destroyed her timeline. They heard the gunshots before the glass shattered, not the other way around. Still, Amy's defense attorney argued that the case wasn't airtight. There were no witnesses to the actual shooting, no DNA evidence linking Amy to the trigger. The bullets inside Bob's body were too damaged to definitively match the gun, and the defense claimed the shell casings could have been dropped from Bob's own pockets after visiting a shooting range. With enough ambiguity, maybe they could create reasonable doubt. Maybe Amy could walk free. The prosecutors faced a difficult decision. They believed Amy was guilty. The evidence pointed to her. But the case wasn't perfect, and they didn't want to force Morgan and Trevor to testify against their mother in open court. The trauma would be devastating for those children. So they offered Amy a plea deal. She would admit guilt, spare her children the trauma of a trial, and receive a reduced sentence. Amy accepted. On November 2, 2006, Amy Bosley entered a Campbell County courtroom wearing a green and white prison jumpsuit. Her face was blank, unreadable. Before the judge announced her sentence, Bob's family was given the chance to speak, to tell Amy directly how her actions had destroyed their lives. Bob's brother James stood up first. He looked Amy in the eyes and called her a liar and a fraud. He told her that while she might enjoy freedom again someday, she would never escape the memories. Every single night, he said, she would see Bob's face. She would see the tears of the children she had orphaned. Then, Bob's sister Deborah spoke. She stared at Amy and asked the one question that haunted them all. Did he beg you to stop? Did Bob plead for his life as you shot him again and again? No one would ever know the answer to that question. Amy remained silent. Finally, Bob's mother Audrey stood up. Her hands trembled as she read a letter filled with grief. She talked about the final goodbye she never got to say, the last conversation they never had, the funeral that should never have happened. Amy sat through all of this with her eyes on the floor. Occasionally, she wiped away tears, but she never spoke, never apologized, never explained. The judge, bound by the plea agreement, condemned the damage Amy had caused, not just to her husband, but to her children, her community, and her own future. He called her actions selfish and cowardly. He sentenced Amy Bosley to 20 years in prison. Under Kentucky law, she would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of her sentence. That meant 17 years behind bars, 17 years to think about what she'd done. As Amy was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, Bob's family watched. Some cried, others just stared. Their brother, their son, was gone forever, and the woman responsible would eventually walk free. The years passed slowly. Amy served her time at the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women. Her children grew up without either parent. Bob was dead, Amy was in prison. Morgan and Trevor had to navigate their teenage years while dealing with the horrible truth that their mother had taken their father's life. On May 17, 2022, exactly 17 years after Bob's death, Amy Bosley walked out of prison. She was 54 years old. Most news outlets barely mentioned her release. There were no cameras, no interviews, no dramatic scenes. Amy Bosley, once the center of a major murder case, simply disappeared into obscurity. Her current whereabouts remain unknown. Some people believe she went searching for the millions she had siphoned away all those years ago. Others think she started over somewhere far from Kentucky using a different name, trying to leave her past behind. Bob Bosley is buried at St. Stephen's Cemetery in Campbell County, Kentucky. His headstone marks the resting place of a man remembered for his generosity, his ambition, and his devotion to family. A man whose life was cut short by the person he trusted most. Looking back, Amy's actions seem both tragic and senseless. She wasn't desperate. She wasn't destitute. Bob wasn't abusive or cruel. The IRS probably would have worked out a payment settlement. If her motive was revenge for his affairs, a divorce might have left her wealthy and free. But instead, she chose the darkest path. She chose to end a life, to orphan her own children, to destroy everything. And for what? To hide her crimes for a little bit longer, to avoid facing the consequences of her actions? In the end, she couldn't escape justice anyway. There's an old saying, made famous by Benjamin Franklin: nothing in life is certain except death and taxes. In Amy Bosley's case, both came knocking on the same terrible morning. The Bosley case reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous threats come from the people closest to us, the people we trust, the people we love, the people who share our homes and our lives. Bob Bosley built his success from nothing. He worked hard, he took risks, he achieved his dreams. But he made one fatal mistake. He trusted the wrong person with too much access and too much power. Amy Bosley had opportunities to come clean, to admit her mistakes, to face the consequences like an adult. But instead, she chose violence. She chose to destroy her family. And in doing so, she lost everything anyway. The children are the real victims here. Morgan and Trevor lost their father to violence and their mother to prison. They had to grow up carrying the weight of this tragedy. And that's the saddest part of this entire story. Thank you for watching Deep Crime. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We cover true crime cases from around the world, always with respect for the victims and their families. Leave a comment below telling us what you think about this case.